Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we've got another phone from Unihertz to check out. This is their newest one called the Titan Slim, and this phone incorporates a BlackBerry-style keyboard with a rectangular display. And although it looks really long, it's actually about the same height as a standard iPhone or Android phone might be. This is an iPhone 13 Pro here. And we're going to take a closer look at what this phone is all about in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this came in free of charge from Unihertz. However, all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this new phone is all about. Now, at the time I'm recording this video, Unihertz is selling this through Kickstarter for about $250. This will then go into retail stores after they deliver it to the Kickstarter backers. This is how Unihertz likes to launch their phones, because they make very specific phones for very specific use cases, and I think they want to make sure there's a market for the phone before it is released. And if you pre-order on Kickstarter, you do get a better price than what you'll pay later on at retail. I have bought a number of phones from them over the years to review here on the channel through their Kickstarter, and they've been able to deliver on time as promised every time. So I think if you are looking for a phone like this and want to save some money and you can wait a little bit, it's probably worth doing that pre-order to get a better price for it. Now, the display on this one is 4.2 inches, but it's running at about a 720p resolution. Not spectacular, but I think when you've got a small display like this, 720p is workable. The exact resolution is 768 by 1280. It's nice and bright, very easy to look at. It's got good viewing angles, as you would expect out of some of the prior Unihertz phones we've looked at. It has 6 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage, but no option for SD cards this time, so the storage is locked in at that 256. It is powered by a Helio P70 processor. That is the same chip that was on the Titan Pocket phone that we looked at recently. The weight is 204 grams or 7.2 ounces. The keyboard feels pretty nice on this, very similar to the other Unihertz phones that we've looked at, and in turn it is very similar to the experience you might get out of a BlackBerry keyboard. It's got a very nice tactile feel as you're typing on it, and if you're somebody who really needs a tactile keyboard, Unihertz, I think, has done a great job bringing these keyboards into the modern smartphone era. That said, the keyboard is always here, and you will have phones that have larger screens that take up the whole front of the device, but for people that really want that tactile feel of a keyboard, you'll have it here, and it's really well implemented. The keyboard is backlit. It looks really nice in the dark, and one of the cool things you can do with the keyboard is configure it to launch apps just by pressing down a key. So for example, I mapped the V key here to YouTube. So if I hold down V, it will load up my YouTube app for me. Likewise, I have email tied into the E key here. Now, when you're entering text on this phone, you will of course not get an on-screen keyboard because you have the physical one, but they will have this section here giving you some smart suggestions to make your typing more efficient. For numbers, you have two options. One is you can hit this little button there and bring up a number keypad. The other option is to push down the Alt key and then type numbers in that way. You can also double tap the Alt key to have the numbers lock in. And of course, as you can see here, the numbers are also sharing space with some of the letter keys. Now, the keys are a bit small, so if you have large hands, you might struggle with this a bit. But I think for people that really need that tactile keyboard, you're going to feel right at home with this one because it does feel very familiar if you are accustomed to these types of keyboards. There's a couple of other controls on here. There is a fingerprint reader right at the top of the keyboard. So if I just hold my finger down here, you can see it unlocks the phone. You also have your basic Android controls here on the keyboard as opposed to them being on the screen. Now, like other Unihertz phones, this feels very well constructed. It doesn't feel like a cheap knockoff phone. This one has more glass on it than prior editions of Unihertz products. It's got this cool effect here on the back that we've seen on some Motorola phones in the past. As you can see, it does pick up fingerprints very easily, but it is a glass back, so you're going to want to protect that and not look at it, unfortunately. So they do have a case that you'll get with the phone to protect it. Unfortunately, it doesn't support wireless charging, which is why you would normally have a glass back in the first place. So that was a bit of a disappointment. So I would just keep the case on it, even though it does look pretty cool with it off. We have a camera here on the back. This is a 48 megapixel camera along with a flash. We'll talk about the camera system in a minute. On the front here, you also have a camera. This is an 8 megapixel camera that's suitable for video conferencing and whatnot. On the side here, you've got your power switch and a volume rocker. And on the other side, you have a shortcut button here that you can program to do different things. So this programming works very similar to the keys, where you can have a short press execute something, a longer press maybe turning on the light here, as you can see. And I think you can also do a double tap program as well with that. If you've got a push to talk service, you could also configure it to work with that. There are 2 SIM slots here. It takes nano SIMs. So you can run it on 2 different carriers, but again, this does not have support for SD cards. Now here in the United States, AT&T has become problematic with these Unihertz phones. It will work on other carriers like Verizon, but if you are using AT&T, you might have some trouble getting this on the network, even though it is compatible with AT&T's bands. And one other note on carrier compatibility, this does not support 5G networks. It only works on 4G LTE. You will notice that there is no headphone jack on this. Other Unihertz phones did have one. You do have a USB Type-C port here at the bottom. This doesn't do display output, but it does support charging, of course, but also data devices. So you could plug in a USB audio adapter here on the bottom to plug headphones in, but you will need something special to have wired headphones working with this. But of course, it does support Bluetooth. At the top here, this little hole is not the headphone jack. It is an IR blaster, so you can use this as a remote control with TVs and air conditioners and other things that have IR remote support. So let's move on now to the cameras and image quality. Unfortunately, this is not going to rival a flagship phone by any stretch. Even though it has a 48 megapixel sensor, as you can see here, the images just don't look all that great. And that's because a lot of the flagship phones have a lot of AI and software enhancements running behind the scenes to improve image quality. This phone really doesn't have that, so you will not get flagship image quality out of this for pictures. Video quality is also pretty bad on this. It will record a maximum of 1080p at 30 frames per second out the back camera. And as you can see here, it doesn't stabilize very well, nor does the video look very nice either. The front camera is 8 megapixel. It'll take a decent picture or a selfie, but again, nothing as good as what you would get out of a flagship phone. And it will record video at 720p out the front, and it should be good enough for doing video conferencing and that sort of thing. But again, no rival to a more expensive flagship phone. Now, as far as its general performance is concerned, I think this will be just fine for most basic tasks like web browsing and email and texting and that sort of thing. The P70 processor won't rival anything from Samsung or Apple, but it's good enough to get your day-to-day stuff done. You also have more screen real estate on this Titan phone versus some of the other ones that Unihertz manufactures, so you do get a little bit more room to play with here. And it also is more than adequate for consuming media. So I've got my YouTube channel up here. I can rotate the screen here and go full screen. You do, of course, get this off-center kind of look to everything because you do have this keyboard hanging around, irrespective of whether or not you actually need it. But it does feel as though I can pull up these videos, watch them at the native resolution of the display without any issues here. So I think for general phone purposes, it works just fine. Let's take a look now and see how games run on this phone. So here is Genshin Impact running on the Titan Slim, and it seems to be running just fine. I do believe this is running at the lowest possible settings you can get this game to run at, but it is playable, as you can see, and it looks pretty good. So I don't think you'll have any trouble with games like this or some of the other casual games that you'll find in the Google Play Store. And again, the advantage of the Slim over some of their other Titan phones is that you do have a more traditional rectangular display, which will work better for games that are always designed for this kind of form factor. But again, you'll also have the issue of the keyboard kind of being in the way when you don't need it. And on the 3D Mark Wildlife benchmark test, we got a score of 730, which is the exact same score we got on the Titan Pocket we looked at recently, and that's because both phones are running with essentially the same hardware inside. And you can also see how this might compare to a few other phones that are close to the price point of this one, the Google Pixel 4a and the iPhone SE from 2022. Now the phone is running Android 11 at the time I'm recording this video. I have found that Unihertz is pretty good about keeping their phones up to date. At least that has been my experience in the past with them, but I'm not sure how long they plan to support this phone or their other ones over the long haul. The battery inside is 4,100 milliamp hours in capacity. That is the same size battery, or very close to the same size battery as the Titan Pocket phone from Unihertz we looked at recently. The battery life on this will get you through a day if you are moderately using the phone. That means texts every once in a while, some emails, maybe a phone call or two, but not running games and other things that really strain the processor. Additionally, if you are located far from your cell tower and the phone has to communicate at a higher power to reach it, you will see reduced battery life in that instance as well. But generally, battery life on these has been pretty close to what I've seen out of more expensive phones. And overall, if you're looking for a phone with a physical keyboard, you don't have many options. But Unihertz has really carved out a niche with these keyboard phones, and they've built a keyboard phone that feels a lot like the old Blackberries did, but you have a modern Android implementation around it. The Android implementation is very much vanilla stock Android here. It really functions quite well, even though it's not a terribly high-performing device. And if you're somebody who really needs a keyboard, you now have at least 3 good choices from Unihertz for achieving that with a phone that can run all of your modern apps. Again, not for everybody, but for those that need a keyboard, these are definitely very high-quality phones that are worthy of consideration. That is going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters Jim Tanis and Tom Albrecht, Hot Sauce and Video Games and Eric's Variety Channel, Brian Parker and Frank Goldman, Amda Brown and Matt Zagaya, and Chris Allegretta. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.